We start where we finished yesterday, and what you see here is a cleaned version of the program, where you see that our goal is to read the text from the console. And we are using get text from the console _0, which is a class that we have here. And you can verify, here is visible now, that what it does, he take a string, the number of lines. This is a thing that maybe I didn't stress yesterday. With this approach, we have to know the number of lines that we are going to put in. In some sense, it's not could be not a limitation, in the sense that we know which type of data we want to see. You say, well, we need to put our data in, let's say, 3 lines. Here, so we create here a string of 3 lines, and in fact, the test from the console, which is a constructor here, take the number, the number of lines of the object that we want to input to the string. We saw yesterday that this is the way to initialize a vector of strings, in fact. Or yesterday we also see that we saw that we wanted to initialize, for instance, a vector of double. In this case, just if we here we would have double, we just write double instead of string. Obviously, this is generating a lot of error in this case, because here we just need strings. We also go and read for a text, and what is composed by our text? We see here that text read is a field of our get text from the console, and here we don't have one single pair of square parentheses, but we have two pair of square parentheses, meaning that we have a vector of vector, or if you prefer, a matrix of strings. We can potentially add even more in doing things like this, which is a vector of vector of vector of strings. And this is a common the common way to declare the things in the vector in Java and the vector of vector in Java. Here, with this command, we declare that our variable is a text read. So just from this command, the compiler knows that it has to address a vector of strings. But it actually doesn't know right now how many lines or how many columns or how many spaces for each vector we have to implement. In fact, what we see here that say, okay, the text we are reading has a certain number of lines, and the number of lines is equal to the rows, the first index here of our vector. And so we have to initialize the space for the number of rows in our matrix, the number of lines in our text. And even this does not contain the real stuff. Even this is actually in the compiler is a number of addresses for each one of the lines, but not the space that contain the values. In fact, we still don't know how many slot we have to place here. So here we create a string. Here we create a string vector, and the string vector is equal to the number of lines. This is because we already saw yesterday the way we have to read the text is to read each lines each times, and each line that we have read is a string in case with spaces inside. So this is properly appropriate. We allocate a string that says the string that we have read, and these are the number equal to the number of line. The text we are reading now is something that is a little bit different, which is a matrix of data. The number of rows is equal to the number of lines. The number of space, the column, let's say, but here we are not limited to have the same number of columns from each line. We can have a different number of words or numbers in each line, but this is still unknown here. So number of strings is a variable, and the number of strings will be the thing to place here in the slot that is still empty in our definition. For what I remember, this is the first time you see a for cycle. We are going to populate a bag of data. Let's say I will call a bag a set of vectors or something of different length. And in this case, it will be a bag of strings. In other cases, it will be a bag of doubles, meaning that the number of columns can be different from each line. So here I have to fill with the data the bag that I implemented. So I have to iterate over all the line first. And this is the way we do with the for cycle. In Java, I believe we didn't saw before any time the for. For works with a variable that is the iterator. Here is an integer number, 1 equal to 0. The command are separated by semicolon. He goes from 0 to the number of lines. As in C, as in other languages, the numbering of the slots of the place of the vector start from 0. So 0, 1, 2, 3. If you want to allocate as many slots as the number of lines, we say minor than the number of lines. And this is the incremental value, meaning that after each iteration, the value of the iterator I is augmented by 1. Then here we have a try-catch expression that we also say yesterday. This is because the command that we use later, and that are the commands that we saw also yesterday, are requires can send out an error that we have to treat. And this is the way to treat the error. Now, finally, here in the try, you will recognize the same command that we produced yesterday in a more simple function than the one we have now here. We have this. We create. We get a signal from system in, which is the console. We open and create actually a new input stream reader. We open a channel of connection from the console. This is what it is, the input stream reader. And then we pipe the results to a buffer that contains all the data, and then deliver the data to who can use it. In this case, buffer read, a buffer reader object that we fill with the data that we deliver to the console. Now we have to populate our text here. So how here we start for instance I equal to 0. So in buffer read here we issue this command. This command read the first line as a single string. So here we have, if you observe here, a vector of string which is long as the number of line. So I am saying the in string read I is actually a string, the first string in the vector of string. And with buffer read, I call this buffer, and I read the first line from the buffer. And I fill with the data, which is actually the first string. I fill this variable here indexed by I. Now I use the string read sub I is a string, one string, but this string can be composed by more words separated, for instance, by a blank space, like here. So I use the command split over the string read sub I to obtain the number of strings that I have to. In this case, I also had the command length to know the length of the strings. This is, and this gives the number of strings that we can use later on for initializing here this thing, this part of the vector. So here I say string read sub I split separate in its word and counts the words. Now, in this meaning, this variable here, in the position I, for row I put all the data that come out from split. Here you see that I am not declaring using a new for allocating the space for the words that I am putting in each line. This is because the method split does it for me. And it's implicit, not explicit. So with this operation, summarizing what I have done, I open the console, open a stream from the console of data, put this data on a buffer. I read from the buffer each line each times. I split each times in its words, and then I put all the words in the field of the text console from 0, in particular in this text read fields. Now, this is repeated for all the lines. So at the end, I have all the lines filled. And at the end, I return the object get test from the console. Here I have a little bit different versions of it. As you see here, I just put the number of line. And here, instead, I put just an object that get test from the console. Because this this method is a print method, which I use to print what I have read. So here I call print text, but I could have equally likely call it print. And what happens is that I get an object like the one I am creating, and then with the double cycle for, I print on the screen the values that I have read. Actually, there are two different, there is one difference here to note. Here I use, first I use the cycle for here. I use in the same way I used before, like here. Let's say is the classical C way to do loops, for loops. In the second line, however, I use a different syntax, meaning that I use a different type of iteration that was introduced later in Java. I don't remember if on Java 5 or Java 7. I say, I have the thing that I am reading from is the text read line E. So here is a row of this bag, and I say for each word, for each string that here I called word containing text.textRead I, which is a string of strings, please print, no, please no, print imperative, the word, and then separate the word by a tabulator. Now let's see if this is executed from here, get text 7. Okay. And this is the main program that does it. First, here I have to allocate a get test from the console. You can also compare this code with the previous main 6, main 4 to analyze the differences because of the re-implementation of the routines. And then I simply issued this command, which is read text from the console, and then print test from the console. As a result of this organization of the code, as you see, the main results very simple. Let's see what is written here in main 6 that we saw yesterday. In main 6 here, I treated more maybe in detail the commands. You see the main contains much more commands. It's much less clean. And but in fact, I use a different a different variable, which is get double from the console. Actually, I was implementing those routines. Then my scope here is to simplify the use and see that here the use become very simple and actually very close to the way we want to have it, meaning that we want to just say, oh, hey, read the text from the console, print it. Obviously, then we want to do something else with this text, but now we just execute it to see what happens. Say, write three lines. I don't know if it's really visible, this thing here. And I have to write three lines, say 1, 2, 3. As you see, here we can have different, one line was completely empty. And the program doesn't complain, actually, that the thing is empty. This could be seen as a lack of robustness, that if we want to assure that all line contains data, we have also to put a control somewhere on this. Otherwise, everybody of us has to know that we can input empty lines also. And this can create some problem later on. So let's see what we did then with main Java. With main Java, let's cancel here and here and here. I am just changing. Here is a get test from the console _0. Here is get test from the console. Then the first command is the same, just change the things. Is exactly the same type of command. Just what just changed was the rewriting of the. We were using get test from the console here instead of. Sorry, get test from the console 0 here. You don't see if I don't enlarge it. And the other is get. Okay. Yes. Okay. Here it is. Actually, get test from the console uses and this we already saw yesterday. We already saw these things. Get string actually is sorry. This is get string from the console, not to get test from the console. And this extend get parameters from console because this one is just the just the reading of a text. In Java 9, what we do here, we use the same way get test from the console. So I read the text from the console, I put the text in the bag. The command were the same that I did yesterday. Actually, the reading is made here. So then I want to transform what I have read into double. So I use a new class which is text to double _0, and here I have double data. Double data is a text to double class And now we go to see what the text to double class do. Text to double 0. Text to double 0 is a class that takes some data and put the data in an array of doubles. So so we have two methods here. One method that does the job, and one method for printing the result that we have here in data. Having a method that prints the data of the object is usually a nice thing to do, because then you have a way to see the data even of complex objects that you are building. So what does text to double? Text to double take an object, get test from the console, where the strings, the primitive strings, let's call them like this, are inserted. This is a text. We have to know here, to initialize this data double, we have to know how many lines we have. And so we read the length of the text that come from the get test from the console. Get test from the console has a field that is text read, which is a bag of strings, we say just a few minutes ago. And this field gives the length, stores the length of the text lines. However, we have to initialize also this one. So to initialize it, we have to declare, we just declare here, we initialize the addresses of the lines. Because at this point of the program, we know that the text lines are in this number that we have already read here in the line before. Now, for each of the text line, this is the cycle 4 that ends here, we say this data I is like to say these things here, is a vector of double, is a vector of vectors of doubles. So what we do is say, okay, we create a space for the addresses of each of the rows of this data. Then we have a cycle inside. I could have done the cycle more or less the same way, but at this point I should have I should have put here the length, a variable with the length of each line in terms of words. Instead, I also here I use the other way to do the for loop. So for each string word in text dot text read I, here what I do is say, okay, data ij is a double, and is actually the double that is written in this word. As you see here, I had to use a new iterator here. The cycle here doesn't keep into account, doesn't upgrade the iterator like here. So I have to explicitly put the iterator j equal to 0 here, and then update the iterator inside the code here. and this return the bag of the double data. No more exceptional thing in int where I use a double cycle. Here is a purely traditional for cycle. Here for the two variables I and j. One thing to notice for novices is that this I and j here are not the same I and j here, because the scope of the I and j here lives inside the parentheses to this environment. Let's say j lives inside these two parentheses here. Is a local variable that lives inside these two parentheses. I, the same thing for I. Just because j was declared here, actually. But let's say if, for instance, j was not declared here and would have lived inside here, it would be local. Okay. In this case, I is local between these two parentheses, and j is local inside these two parentheses here. So they are different variables. The last step in these things here, in this thing here, is then made but maintain, where I am reading data from the console. So I go to execute the thing. I'm sorry for because it's very small, because this is maintain, write 3 lines. I have to write 3 lines of numbers, obviously. Let's put a thing like this. Now let's put, for simplicity, I can write things this way. Okay. What happens if I execute this and I put a word here? Obviously, this program gives me an error that is saying that for input string w, I am not really able to. There is not an explicit program here, but I can eventually add an error that is more explicit. Let's say, oh, you entered a letter, not a number here. So that's but actually I can understand here, because it say mat float point decimal red Java format string. Essentially, I can understand that text to double try to parse a double, and there is not a double here. One interesting thing now is that we always executed our program inside the Eclipse console. Instead, we can also execute the program outside the Eclipse console. How can we do? One thing that we can do is doing the exporting the thing. So go export, say Java, runnable jar file. Next, export to destination. And in my case, export to destination is, now I have to, okay. Let's say here, save. Why? Launch configuration. Yes, here I have to select what main thing. Okay, say red cowbells. Like, okay, doesn't matter. If you see, if I go here to Java 2019, okay, red double bar. Here there is a red double bug dot jar is the are the executable for the program that we first execute Java menu jar. Red. You have to change these dumb variables that are too small. Now I don't. Yeah, I am not anymore able to execute the jar. That's incredible, but we can find it here. How to execute a jar file. Okay. So as you see, yeah, I was doing the things properly, I guess. Say Java menu jar. Okay. Okay. I was just putting the wrong name. Write 3 line 1, 3, 4. So I have a program that runs outside my my Eclipse, and I can do for any of the main that I do this that I wrote here to create program that simply run outside the console. This is a way to export. I guess I told you before, but I didn't ever then show explicitly. So for this part, well, I think we can stop here, and then we go to writing files or reading and writing data from files.